Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. In Japan, victims of the tsunami and subsequent Fukushima atomic meltdown have received $250,000 worth of gold bars from a mystery benefactor. And in the UK, victims of the tsunami of bad debt and the subsequent global thermo-derivative meltdown are receiving tins of mystery meat. Suzanne Salami, for example, according to the Guardian newspaper, is a mother of 3 in Peckham who survives on 30 pounds per week and so has no alternative but to visit the food bank, where she is given tin cans of mystery meat to feed her family. Suzanne Salami told The Guardian, quote, "When you can't afford to buy anything to eat or ask where it comes from, it's not fair." Suzanne Salami, let me introduce you to your mystery meat companions, Gwen and Lady. Yum. Suzanne Salami, nothing tastes better on a Gwen and Lady burger than a little insider trading ketchup. Stacy?
Max Keiser. Before we go further into Suzanne Salami, that's her real name, talking about the mystery meats given to her at these food banks, let's talk about the slaughter of Gwen and Lady, a warning ignored. In October 2008, Emma Hitchcock said farewell to her beloved horses Gwen and Lady. She had agreed to lend them to a woman who could offer them unlimited pasture. For a while, Hitchcock was sent pictures of her 2 horses grazing contentedly. She now knows that within 2 weeks, they had been sent to a slaughterhouse and exported to Europe for food.
Okay, so the woman was getting photos of the horses that she sent off to some kind of horsey la-la land or retirement horsey land, and they were not turned into glue like during Victorian times, but they were turned into Findus lasagna and other derivative horsey meat products here in the UK that people were galloping to Tesco to quaff down. And she lived with them, however, their virtual counterparts in a virtual reality. I guess the point here we're making is that similar in the financial realm, people are told they own bonds, but they're really bond derivatives. So when the bonds blow up or the stocks blow up, they're left holding the bag because they were sold a bag of worms or a derivative or a photo of a bond or a collateralized debt obligation or an index that's supposed to represent some kind of equity, but then magically it disappears because the actual equity was forced into the crushing machine and the meat lasagna perpetrating machine that ends up in the pockets of people like Warren Buffett, and everyone else has ended up with nothing, just photos of what it was that they thought they had but doesn't exist anymore. It's all that virtual reality now that people are left with while they're forced to eat either derivatives that have no value inherently or meat that's really made from horse or rat or pig or whatever they find in the gutter?
Well, in fact, we know from the hurricane that hit New York recently and flooded it that many bonds washed away. All the bonds held at the DCC were washed away, so they were sent out for slaughter. But the other thing that it reminds me of is that all these photo ops we've been having of our gold that we allegedly hold. In the last year, we have photo opportunity after photo opportunity with the Queen, Timothy Geithner. They keep on saying, look, this is our gold. And in fact, this week as well, we've also been sent more photos of our alleged gold. Gold at New York Fed is intact. Some purer-than-thought audit finds the U.S. government's gold in New York is safe in a vault underneath Manhattan, and some of the precious metal there is purer than previously thought. That's according to a first-ever audit conducted last year by the Treasury Department of U.S. gold on deposit at Federal Reserve banks in New York and elsewhere.
The audit done at the bank does not include gold that's been leased out. So it's an incomplete audit. They took a photo of some gold, and they say the gold is here, and it's somehow purer than we thought it was. However, it's not there because they leased it out or they sold it. We know this from tracking the flow of gold and silver and precious metals around the world right now, that the buyers of gold versus the gold available on the market lead to one inescapable conclusion. Central banks are selling their gold. And so that's a lie. So when the New York Fed puts out that report, they're lying shamelessly. And of course, that's the spawning ground for people like Tim Geithner and others who have become so endemic to this campaign of global fraud that's destroyed the global economy.
Well, we're seeing in these currency wars the likes of Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, looking to have their gold repatriated because they have loaned their gold to America. They have it on deposit there at the New York Fed. but like Emma Hitchcock's here, who her horses, Gwen and Lady, were actually sent out for slaughter, the gold of Germany was probably sent out for slaughter, i.e. it's been turned into little bits of jewelry all around the world, and it's not coming back.
Right, Germany is not going to get their gold back. They have been given a little tap dance saying, we'll give it some of your gold back over 7 years. But German people should understand that gold is gone. Their sovereignty in terms of the integrity of that nation has been destroyed by Geithner and other New York Fed heads who have leased the gold out, sold the gold. This is not in debate. It's clear if you look at the flow of the metals and you look at the markets, Geithner lied and he junked German gold. Now, is that the basis for starting a war? Well, they have. It's called a currency war. And then that will morph into a hot war. And who started it? Geithner.
So, and this is the other thing, as we've noted before, this globalization is falling apart. And part of it is the trust is falling apart. People can no longer trust what is in their food. Of course, Nestle, the world's biggest manufacturer of foodstuffs, is now also withdrawing their products because of horse meat discovered in that. So, of course, underlying all of this is the U.S. and the U.S. dollar. And that's why they're also saying, you know, as part of the audit, the Treasury tested a sample of the government's 34,021 gold bars in the New York Fed's vault 5 stories below the Manhattan's financial district. In 3 of the 367 tests, the gold was more pure than the Treasury records had indicated. So they've increased the value, they say, because of this, of their holdings. Again, it's weird that they're testing food products and we find out that it's a lot less pure than we ever thought. Here, it's actually purer than we thought, they say.
Yeah, and the U.S. dollar, it's like this horse meat that's circulating the globe. And the fact is that the U.S. dollar will eventually become worthless because it's backed to some degree by workers in America whose tax revenues are backing the U.S. dollar. There's the tax revenue of the American people and the U.S. military. That's what backs the U.S. dollar. Tax revenue in America is crashing. Wages are crashing. People can't afford McDonald's anymore. People can't afford even to go to Walmart anymore. Food stamps are soaring. And then, of course, the inflation coming to the energy complex, including gasoline, is going to hurt the U.S. military because they buy $250 million worth of gas every day to fund the Pentagon's war machine. When the price of gas continues to go up, as it is hitting record prices in California and other states, the Pentagon won't be able to afford to fill up their gas, their tanks, and their other vehicles of destruction. So it's a double-edged sword. So that dollar is going to zero. Gold is going much higher. Germany will ask for their gold, and they'll be given a receipt for worthless dollars or a horse meat burger from Findus.
So just like the global financial derivatives hurt the poorest, the worst, and the middle class, the people that have to work for a living, just like all the risk and the toxins were dumped into their pension funds, what meager pension funds there were, because, of course, most ordinary people are the sort that could be slaughtered, not sheared. You don't bother shearing them, you just slaughter them, right? Horse meat scandal, mystery meat at the food bank close to foodie's paradise. So this is where Suzanne Salami was getting her tins of food, which is right next to the Borough Market, which is selling, you know, beef at 48 pounds a kilo. So here are this one class of people who could have some real food, who can have real wealth, who can have real money, who could have real homes. Everybody else is very precarious, and as she says, I'm being made to eat stuff I don't know about, and I am being let down. It's like we're being told to eat and shut up. And you can compare this to the financial markets as well.
Absolutely. You've got a perfect illustration of this two-class society of serfs who can't afford decent food and are becoming either obese or starving to death, versus those like a Warren Buffett, for example, who game the system, trade on inside information, manipulate the markets, who are making the economy in the U.S. less competitive by monopolizing and taking companies off the market. And, of course, he doesn't have a problem sourcing beef or food, but everyone that he's destroying with his predatory monopolist behavior and insider trading and market manipulation, they can't get a decent hamburger anymore. And he's laughing all the way to wherever he goes to get his schwing, schwing, schwa, schwa.
And then, you know, as you mentioned, the food stamp usage is increasing rapidly in America. And despite this, here you see the inflation in the fact that even though people are receiving more food stamps, they're unable to even shop at Walmart. A scary reality about Walmart's customers, they're broke. So as we know, Walmart shares plunged on Friday, last Friday, when an internal email was leaked in which Cameron Geiger, a VP at the company, asked, where are all the customers and where is their money? So they don't even have enough money to shop at Walmart, which is already selling all this mystery meat product. Where do they go from there if they can't even afford mystery meat?
Well, Walmart has always been a poison chalice, as we've talked about for years. For every dollar somebody saves at Walmart, they lose $2 in wages. Eventually, they won't be able to even afford to shop at Walmart. So they've boxed themselves into an unproductive disenfranchisement or enslavement or serfdom to somebody called Walmart, who, if you add all their wealth together, the Walmart family, it's the wealthiest family in America. They got wealthy by imposing a neo-feudalism in America. And now these people are finally waking up to the fact that, hey, you know what? We're now entering the prison industrial complex as cogs in the prison machine because Walmart screwed us badly.
And then finally, U.S. homeowners are repeating their mistakes. So these are the chumps in America that still have a few little pennies left to their name. And if there's one thing Americans should have learned from the recession, it's the importance of diversifying risk. Middle-class households had too much of their net worth tied up in their homes and were too exposed to stocks through 401ks and other investments. So this study looked at the holdings of Americans, and 3/4 of their wealth is tied up in only stocks in their houses. And they consider this very high risk. This is considered very high risk. These people are lined up to be slaughtered, not sheared.
Well, Alan Greenspan said just recently that he doesn't look at jobs, he doesn't look at wages. He only looks at the stock market to determine whether or not policies at the Fed are successful or not. So what he's saying is that everyone in America is a gambleaholic. Everyone is their own personal hedge fund. Everyone deserves to have their net worths stolen periodically from the likes of Warren Buffett and others. And that's just their tough luck. The idea of having a job that creates savings, that creates capital, that creates free markets, Alan Greenspan is saying we don't like that anymore. We just want a gulag casino.
But if you look at the charts that they provide here, in 1983, Americans, the average American, had a more diversified portfolio, including business equity and cash was a large part of their holdings. 83, it shoots up to now this precarious situation they're in. Of course, exactly when Alan Greenspan arrived, exactly when CNBC arrived, to propagandize these people and brainwash them into thinking they should concentrate their wealth in the stock market, where it could be slaughtered by you lend out your money, you lease it to the bankers who are going to return it to you even healthier and better than before. Of course, that doesn't happen. And they say houses make up a smaller share of the wealth of a rich family. The wealthy also benefit from better financial advice.
Yes, well, the sacred cows have become the horsey Findusburgers, haven't they? Stacey Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, stay tuned for the second half. I'll be speaking to HBOS whistleblower Paul R. Moore. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Paul Moore, a former risk regulator who blew the whistle on HBOS and is now trying to fix the financial world, making it a safer place for the taxpayer. Paul Moore, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Yeah, good to be back. How are you, Max?
Excellent. Paul Moore, the FSA is in the news, this time the Food Standards Agency, for failing to actually regulate food standards. There's a remarkable similarity to the failure of the Financial Services Authority, the other FSA, in that whistleblowers were ignored and ignorance feigned on the fraud being made public. Your thoughts on both these FSA scandals?
How stupid can you be to call yourself the FSA twice? I mean, that causes confusion in the first place. And the other thing I noticed was that the politicians say they'll throw the full force of the law against the horse meat corrupt people, but they couldn't be bothered to do it when it came to the actual biggest thing, which was the financial crisis. So it just proves that ultimately the people with the money can protect themselves from virtually anything.
People understand that eating dodgy meat that's unregulated has potential to harm them, and it's, of course, fraud. But people don't understand that eating dodgy securities, eating a dodgy bailout or a collateralized debt obligation they have the perception that it's a victimless crime. You hear that phrase all the time, but that's not true, is it, Paul?
Not at all. I said this last time I was on. United Nations have estimated that the financial crisis drove 100 million people back into abject poverty. Lots of people die when they're in abject poverty. And I've estimated that the financial crisis probably killed more people than any conflict since the Second World War. So it's not victimless. And even those people who don't die become miserable.
Paul Moore, let's talk about costs for a second, because clearly in the food area, trying to reintroduce integrity into the food chain means costs are going to go up, and go up pretty dramatically. Similarly, in the financial sector, we always hear the argument made that, well, we are deregulating these economies in the banking system because we're going to save you money by making access to capital cheaper, and they use this cost argument. But in both cases, costs are rising. The cost of food is going up, and of course, all the money used to paper over the crimes in the financial system are now resulting in inflation around the world in energy and food and other areas, exactly going back to the horse meat scandal. So that idea of a cheaper, more efficient system is completely false as well, Paul, correct?
The reality is the cost of the financial crisis has outweighed, I don't know the exact statistic, but decades worth of tax. So it actually didn't solve the problem. Let me just say something, okay? The way the corporate system works is so corrupt that there is now absolutely clear evidence that the people who end up at the top of the boardrooms have 3 times the psychopathic attribute of the standard individual in society. In other words, we put people in charge of large, societally important organizations, whether they be food companies, supermarkets, financial sector organizations, banks, or what have you. Look at the nicknames, right? You've got the Gorilla, that was Dick Fuld of Lehman Brothers. The Knife was the nickname of the chief executive of Morgan Stanley. Alf was the nickname of the chief executive of Credit Suisse. That stands for arrogant little f***er. I don't know whether you had to put that on your program. The system is rotten. There is something rotten in the state of Denmark, and there's quite a few things we need to do. But we can't do them because the vested interest is run by the people with money. So we're in a bloody muddle.
Paul Moore, let's talk about the intersection between food prices, financial fraud, and psychopaths. And I want to talk about Barclays Bank for a second. They were caught rigging LIBOR. They've been caught involved in a number of financial scandals. They recently came out and said that they're going to step away from speculating in the agricultural commodities business, as are a few other banks, because now it's become clear that the psychopathic banker that you describe, which is endemic in the system, goes out there and they drive the price of food up to astronomical highs, even though it means poverty, widespread poverty, or triggering a revolution, as we saw in Egypt. So here you have an intersection between agricultural speculation, the food chain and the food costs, and psychopathic bankers. They all seem to come together in the agriculture business, Paul.
Well, they come together in all businesses. The love of money is the root of all evil, always has been. And yes, I think there's increasing evidence of manipulation of the agricultural commodity markets. I think there's increasing evidence of manipulation of the oil markets. It doesn't really matter what you're operating in. What we need to do is we need to recognize that company law, that's the way these big companies work, and the duties that directors have, was not designed for companies with balance sheets the size of sovereign governments and more power than most of them. We need, for big companies, to make sure that directors' duties include public duties because they have such big societal impact. We need to do a whole range of other things, but that's the heart of the thing. By the way, Adam Smith, when he wrote The Wealth of Nations, he was very strong on the idea of conscience being part of a free capitalist world, and they talk about him as if he sort of said, oh, you can do anything you like. The truth of the matter is the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And therefore, you do need to have constraints on human nature where if money is the sole measure of everything, we end up exploiting others as we satisfy our own greed. destroying our planet by over-consuming, and also actually destroying what life's about. What is life about?
Well, let's ask Mark Carney, who's the incoming Bank of England governor, this important question, because George Soros has come out and said that the UK pound, along with the Japanese yen, are incredibly overvalued. He points to the UK having debt to GDP, inclusive of private debt and household debt and government debt, of close to 900% debt to GDP. The pound is under attack. And Mark Carney is being parachuted in, presumably, to what they say change the definition of inflation, or to raise the inflation expectation. So the meaning of life for Mark Carney, apparently coming in, is to get that money flowing even more spectacularly as it is now, which would degrade life in the UK to a greater degree. Isn't Mark Carney the poster child for a banking psychopath?
Whether he's got a job that is doable, I very much doubt. And the whole system is set. I mean, how on earth are we going to repay this debt? I've got no idea.
Okay, let's move on to a couple of solutions that you mentioned, or things that should be looked at more closely. One, of course, is prop trading or proprietary trading. Give us a 20-second definition of prop trading, and then why you think it should be banned.
Proprietary trading is a manipulation of the markets through a dominant position in information, often generated through conflicts of interest, a dominant position in mathematics, and a dominant position in computer science. Ordinary people can't deal in the marketplace in any sensible way in competition with proprietary traders. Proprietary trading is not banking. It's got nothing to do with banking. It shouldn't be allowed.
And going back to Adam Smith, in his day, of course, if he were able to write about proprietary trading, he would point out that it's a complete violation of all the basic tenets of capitalism, and he would outlaw it or suggest it be outlawed instantaneously. Paul Moore, additionally, you're talking about full reserve banking. Of course, this would imply that instead of a 10% or less reserve and loans being kind of made out to this level where the central banks end up with less than 2% equity to the loans outstanding, for example. Full reserve, of course, would reverse that. Talk a little bit about it.
Well, obviously, 97% of the money supply is created through the creation of credit by ordinary commercial banks. So 97% of our money is debt. Now, full reserve banking creates a completely new way of doing things. Your current account, right, they can't lend money in your current account, so there can never be a run on a bank. Any other money that you want to save, you make the decision as to what level of risk you want to take with that money. So you might want high-risk loans, medium-risk loans, or low-risk loans. It's a brand new way of thinking about things. It removes the level of encouragement to debt in society, and it will have a major impact. It's also, along with peer-to-peer lending, which is another way of getting rid of the way banks issue credit in order to make money for themselves.
Right, peer-to-peer lending, very active here in the UK and elsewhere as a way to do an end run around the entrenched oligopoly that is the banking system. But Paul Moore, you've been in the banking sector, you've been a regulator. You know quite well that it's almost impossible for people to start new banks in the UK. Wouldn't it be easy if George Osborne and David Cameron were truly interested in getting some economic growth in the UK? Wouldn't the first order of business be allowing for 5 or 10 new banks to be created to compete with the 4 major entrenched oligopolists that have destroyed this country and are destroying this country, Paul?
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. But I think encouraging and looking thoroughly into full reserve banking and looking thoroughly and supporting peer-to-peer lending will break that oligopoly that you refer to of these huge banks that have not demonstrated their... I mean, look at Barclays. What did they do? They got themselves into trouble, so they recruited Sir David Walker, a city mandarin, a very nice guy, to be the chairman. They then recruited Hector Sants, the ex-regulator, to be their head of global compliance and pay him £3 million a year. Goodness gracious me, you've got a failed regulator, a failed guy who's in charge of corporate governance. And now Anthony Jenkins says they're going to do all sorts of things completely different. Will anybody really believe them? I would like personally to be going in there and having a really good rummage around and check that they're actually doing what they're saying, because until somebody independent goes in, nobody will believe them.
Right. Hector Sands, the new compliance guy at Barclays, he's the guy you bribe the most. I remember from my days on Wall Street, it's the compliance guy who gets the biggest Christmas bribe every year. Anyway, Paul Moore, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Cheers.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Paul R. Moore, the H-Boss whistleblower. If you'd like to contact us, you can email us at keiserreport@rttv.ru or tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.